As our talk is titled, Getting the Most Out of Your Small Design Team, there's actually only 3 of us designers, compared to, I imagine, quite a few more designers at Australia Post. So for us, it's all about getting the rest of our team involved and sort of, I guess, using them to help generate ideas. And what we found with the design sprint process is it's really helped us bring people in quite easily. So starting off, I guess I just wanted to ask everyone a question. Have you guys done the 5-day design sprint, sort of the Google version? I mean, how many of you have actually attempted it? We've got a few. Okay. That's interesting because we've never actually done it. We've only ever tried the a sort of cut down version that fits within our process. So first off, I'll just hand you over to Mel, who's going to introduce August.
Yeah, hey, so we're August. We're a technologically led creative agency headquartered in Melbourne, but we do have 2 other agencies or locations in Manchester and Toronto. And being a small design team, we just wanted to give you guys an example of how we've kind of morphed the process to make it more Augustified to how it works for us, working with the rest of the team.
Yeah, cool. So a little bit of an overview of our process. It probably looks very similar to the last talk because we all follow the same kind of thing, but it's sort of our version of it. So we already have a few established processes at August. The way that we launch projects, we have a sort of discovery session, which involves lots of understanding with the client. Then we move on to looking at the problem and choosing the right problem to solve. This is kind of where the design sprint process comes into play. And then, as the girls mentioned, the fun part of sketching and then refining that, getting the prototype sorted, and then testing, and then looking more into the development side of things. I was going to mention something else. Oh yeah, so at the end of this, we've actually got a few little takeaways of things that we've learned as well that we want to share with you guys. So starting off, sort of diving into that a bit deeper, is the project discovery and kickoff. And we sort of do this for every project that we work on. So we work on a variety of clients, and this process works for all of them. So it's really cool.
Yeah, so how we started off is with something we call context sheets. And we do this internally with our team to get as much of a knowledge background from our clients as we can before bringing them into the process. So with this, we write all over the walls. There's stuff all over the walls at our agency. And yeah, we just try to figure out the context behind the client, the purpose of the project we're doing, and any problems we're going to solve. And so once we do this internally, we bring the clients into the process as well. And as you can tell on the screen, Mike, our analyst, is writing on the walls.
He's sitting over there somewhere.
He's over there. And so he's writing in red pen. So once the client comes in, we fill in any gaps that we've missed along the way or any other pieces that they want us to include in the process. And it usually takes a few hours. It's a pretty extensive process, but by the end of it, we're both on the same page. And then from there, we usually go into a roadmap, and that's us, again, writing on walls on note cards, but it helps us get a timeline for our whole process and just figure out the specific problems that we want to solve along the way. Yeah,
and it sort of maps out all the features and deliverables of the project. There's another one of us, Lucas, over there. He's writing on the wall, so everyone's turned up tonight.
And there can be as many as 18 people in a session at one time, so we have a good amount of ground rules set in place so that everyone's heard and no one's talking over each other and things like that.
It's always a good way to start the kickoff of the project like that. So then what we do is the next step. There's actually 7 steps to this that we just made up because it fit nicely on the screen. So just kind of ignore that. So the next one is choosing the right problem. This is where we start to think about the users and start to map out the journeys. Again, seeing the system cards all over the wall. There's some handsome guy up there doing that. So no, that's a bit much. Bold. So then what we do is we map out those user journeys and look at their goals, etc. And then what we do is a how might we session. Some of you guys may have done some of these. It's a pretty cool way of sort of converting problems into opportunities in the form of questions. And it's a way for us to make sure that we're asking the right questions so we can solve the right problem. From then, what we do is we, as the girls mentioned, choose the right focus area because you can't do a design sprint for a whole project. It's just too big. And we really need to make sure that we're just getting the one sort of most crucial bit solved.
Yeah, and there's not only one design sprint per project. Like we might do several throughout the whole process. So it's a bit different for us because they're a bit smaller, so we can focus in on one problem at a time, but multiple times throughout one project. So yeah, from here, once we have the direction decided, we actually get together and, or actually individually do a bunch of research beforehand. So in the similar industry, any functions that are the same, we kind of pull together a ton of examples and we put them in Vision. And we show them to the group before starting the whole process so that we can get our creative juices flowing a bit. And we've actually started involving the clients if they'd like to be in some of the design sprints within our company. And so once you have the ideas kind of up on the screen, we do something called Crazy Eights, which is similar to your sixes thing you guys were talking about, where you basically fold your paper up into 8 sections and you try to get 8 ideas out on the paper in 8 minutes, or as many as you can within that 8-minute time. But we're still not sharing it yet because we don't want to intrude on each other's design ideas and things like that. We don't want to influence each other's thoughts. So. Yeah,
just avoiding that influence. And I guess that sort of old idea of your first idea is never that great. So it's a really good way of just, testing that and sort of doing 7 different versions in a really sort of tight, pressured situation. You get some really good results there.
Yeah, and hopefully from here you've sketched out 1 or 2 ideas that you really want to nut out a bit more in the following process.
Yeah. So then step 4 is it's all about refining and selecting. So this is what some of you guys may know as the solution sketching. So what we do here is we spend about 30 minutes each, and we want to get these ideas as realistic, sort of detailed as possible, so we can all stick them on the wall and then explain them to each other so they make sense. This example here is actually doing one with the client. So this is the first one we actually tried to involve the client with. It was pretty cool because they were quite a creative bunch, and we thought we'll give it a go, and it worked really well. They had some really good ideas that actually ended up in the final design. So
and it's good,
cool.
Yeah, because along the process, whenever the clients come in, we've had some come in with these grand ideas, and then once they actually try to get them on paper, they realize it's not the best outcome for the user or not the simplest solution. So we've had a few get frustrated, but realize the process along the way that they need to take a step back sometimes.
Yeah, it's a nice way to kind of level the expectations as well.
Yeah.
So this one in particular, it was for City of Sydney, a nice little arts project for them, little website about showcasing different installations and things around the city. So it was actually a 2-day session. We just flew up for a couple of days. First day was understanding the brief, doing the context and roadmap. Second day was a design sprint. So it just sort of proves that we could do something really quickly with the client, and it's a nice little process to follow to get ideas out quickly.
So from here, like John had mentioned, we've already dotted it up similar to the first presentation. And so we know what areas we want to focus in on. And this doesn't only come from one sketch. It's throughout all of our sketches up on the wall. We've dotted up different parts. So for example, on the screen, Cotton On Foundation, one of the ones that we focused on with one of our mini design sprints was the first impact and how we show live data that their organization has raised. And so we did a few sketches, did the whole process, and once we were putting it on the screen, we realized we needed the animation side of it to kind of get the users to realize what was happening earlier on. So like John had mentioned as well, we don't work designer next to designer. We work all intermixed, designers next to developers, next to copywriters. And so one of our developers, we sat together and did a code pen example to figure out how we wanted the animation to work on the home screen, along with all the other bits of the design sprint that we had done.
And I think, sometimes when we do sort of, I should have mentioned this from the start, we have like about 5 to 7 of us in what we call the mini design sprint. So we range from developers, designers, copywriters, the analytics guys. So we get a really good spread. And there are points like this where we're like, we need to test if this is actually going to be viable to build. So we get the developers to have a play. And it's pretty cool because we get some answers pretty quickly, as well as doing more of a sort of envision static prototype.
Yeah, once it's in InVision and we've already done it in Sketch and everything, we like to make it click through so that we can get an idea of how the user is really going to flow throughout the whole process, and just as real as possible, so we know what we're going to get earlier on and we can fix any problems we have earlier on in the process.
Yeah, we don't want to spend too much time on it at this stage. It's always just about getting the most realistic version out as quickly as possible. We try and do this probably within a day. So yeah, we don't want to spend too much time. And there's a few more points on this slide about Principle, we've had a play with that. You guys probably know about Principle for a bit more sort of detailed animation. So an example that we did using that was to test like a video in the header, and we got some really positive feedback from testing that with the users, which kind of led to the client giving us some more cash to go and shoot a load of video. So that was really cool. It's a good way of validating that. Yeah, so sometimes it's good to go a little bit further with the prototype just to get some more feedback. And then in Vision Studio, it's all new and shiny, and we're having a play with that. It's really cool. So looking forward to playing more with that and seeing where that goes. Cool. Yeah, so then next step is testing. That's the whole point of doing this process, is to get it in front of users quickly. And we always send it around internally, make sure that we haven't done anything too stupid before we get people in to test. We have a little setup at August where we sit people in a separate room, Chromecast the screen, and we all sit around and watch and take notes. It's hard not to want to talk about what's happening sometimes, get a bit excited when people click on your feature that you thought of, but we just have to like tell everyone to shut up so we can actually write notes and make the most of it.
And again, we put more stuff up on the walls so that we know to reference it later as well.
Yeah, and it's sort of, yeah, back to the system cars on the wall. Everything is all about getting it visual so everyone's across it. Cool.
Yeah, so from here, we like to get development started early so that we can keep working in step-by-steps versus we don't really work in our office with completing a design and then handing it over to a developer. We work side by side throughout the entire process with the copywriters and everyone else involved. And so setting up a style guide early on helps us just get started on it, even if it's a module, just nutting those out in the beginning so that we can start designing something while the developer is working on one bit, and then we'll each start on the next bit together. So the earlier on we can get this done, the better.
Yeah, and this is kind of where we start to roll things out. So
yeah,
once the initial concept is kind of approved, and again, we probably would show the client at the solution sketching stage, get that early investment, and then we don't really do those sort of big presentation aha moments anymore, which is nice. So then it's pretty smooth sailing from here on in.
Yes, that's our process.
Yeah, so that's pretty much it. It's quite a simplified version, very similar to what all you guys probably do. But here's a couple of things that we've learned along the way to finish off. The first one is people think very differently, and it's probably pretty obvious, but when you get a whole sort of bunch of different minds together, you get some really interesting results. Thinking about from a development point of view, design, copywriting. Our copywriter, Elliot, he always puts really nice narrative to the stories. So he makes us think differently as well. So it's really cool to have as many different types of people involved.
Yeah, and like we said, we get the whole team involved in the beginning, even the clients sometimes in the design sprint process, so that the solution's better in the end, because we've had all the ideas from all the different sides of the team. Because just because we're the designers doesn't mean we're the only ones with great ideas. Like everyone in our team has great ideas. And even if they can't draw perfectly, they can still put stick figures down and circles and squares and still get their idea across one way or another. And
it's that idea of sharing early, getting feedback early. So the more people involved at the start, the better. Sort of leads us onto this one. Clients can see the thinking behind the ideas. Now, mentioned it previously, getting them involved at the solution sketching or actually doing the design sprint. They really appreciate the process then, if you can get them involved and the thinking behind the ideas. So highly recommend getting them in at that stage rather than waiting for the big presentation that could go wrong. So that's a really good sort of takeaway, to get them involved as early as possible.
Yeah, and like we've mentioned several times, we're a very small design team, so it just gives us a really good head start, and just gathering all those ideas when working with our entire team across the whole range. Just because that is the majority of the design process, is coming up with that idea and solution that's best for the user. And so yeah, just gathering all those ideas from the whole team helps us get to the computer as quickly and efficiently as possible.
Yeah. So that's about it. Thank you very much. Got a few questions.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Thanks, Mel. It looks like a really cool process. So you have InVision Studio?
I've got the early access. I've had a bit of a play, but we're not fully converted yet. Wait till features that Sketch does not.
Sure, sure. I signed up for InVision Studio at Christmas. I'm still waiting for it. They send me some socks. So I've got some InVision socks, but I don't have Studio, so I'm waiting for it. Any questions for John or Mel?
Hi. I was curious on one, how long do your sprints range from time-wise? And also, I have a second. Actually, it goes to the two earlier also, but for a sprint, how do you prepare for talking to users if you're not getting the context until that first day? Because that in itself is a bit of planning. And if it's a sprint or a spike, how do you plan for that?
Yeah, so we, I'll start with the second question. The first one is we work in 2-week cycles normally with our normal process. And what we do at the start of a project is always understand that context and do the road mapping and talking to the users at that point. So as well as talking to the client, we are doing the user interviews and all that kind of stuff at that stage. So we really understand the whole project before we get going into that next step,
Well, also since, like we mentioned, we don't just do one design sprint for one process or for one client. So sometimes they could only go for 5 hours just for our one mini design sprint. But then we'll do several throughout the whole project. So it's not really they're all different. They're all completely different.
And they probably fit it within a 2-week cycle as a total because we work on quite a variety of different clients. Sometimes we can't get 5 days to sit down and do it. So we try and manage that best we can, but with the team, we're all working on different clients. So trying to just fit that in where we can, really.
Great prezzo also, by the way.
Thanks.
Cool. Any other questions? Adam?
Hi, just coming from an agency perspective, I'm quite curious. I've been wanting to run these more sort of authentically as well in our agency. And I was just curious in terms of getting the clients to buy in on these, what does that kind of look like when you have that conversation up front? Because I know obviously when you've got 5 to 7 people's time for such a long time.
For us, we have the clients in at the very first part of the process anyway with our context sheets and road mapping. So we talk about it with them at that stage. And what that means is we talk about our process and this is our regular process and they kind of just understand that's kind of a part of it. So having that initial those initial sessions with them really just clears that up. And then we show them examples of where we got to with previous projects and stuff. So it really helps just to visualize that as well for them. And because we're working as a team from the very start, it's kind of like, it just makes sense to have the team in that as well. So they get it from the start. It's pretty straightforward.
How does feasibility work with your design sprint? Because it sounds like you run multiple ones and it's a lot smaller than the traditional design sprint.
Yeah, so I guess just briefly on that, when we do multiple ones, we sometimes might do a sort of an original one to test with proper users. And then we might actually use it as a bit of a creative tool. So if there's a few more templates that maybe aren't as critical to a website, for example, we will just get the team back together and we'll come up with the ideas and generate some quick sketches to then try a few different templates. So sometimes we use it for the core problem. And then the secondary ones are usually like, let's not just do it ourselves. Let's make sure the whole team's involved. So we try and get them in, even if we're doing some smaller templates and things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because like I said before, we're not the only ones that have these ideas for each module even. So if we're translating it, once we're switching to the mobile version, sometimes we'll just get the team together and do a quick mini design sprint just to get everyone's ideas on the best process to do that and how it should flow and everything like that. So mini internal ones as well.
And it's probably more the sketching part. I mean, because that's more fun as well. So everyone gets together and has a bit of fun with that. So yeah, not the full process every time, but using elements of it, which is a good way just to get everyone on the same page and get all the good ideas out quickly.
Any other questions? Yes.
Just agency wise, let's be honest, clients won't always buy into the process of like design thinking and whatnot. So could you tell us, if you have it, the anecdote on how you sold it in the very first time?
I think that we actually just tried it internally and just had to play with it. And then that way we had some examples to show them. So yeah, if you're a small agency, just give it a go. Work on an internal project, and then you've got some sort of examples there to show the client how it works. And as soon as they can see that thinking, they usually buy in pretty quick.
Did you have any follow-up, Daniel? I guess you could send them a copy of Jake Knapp's book. Just, you know, send it over. And have you had any clients come in saying they want to do a design sprint?
We've done a few with the clients, and usually once they do one, they want to be involved in as many as possible because they just love the clarity of being involved in the process early on. And a lot of the times they come into it with their own ideas in their head. So just being heard and being able to sketch that out for us, they love. So a lot of times they ask, when's the next one? Like, can we come back in and do it again? So they usually enjoy it. Like doing it.
Yeah, sure. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, John. Thanks, Mel. Awesome.